Here are your contestants.
welcome to the Young Turks. I'm Michael Shore, Anna Kasparian, our son Brett. We are here. We have. Come on.
I was a last-second addition.
T-shirt,
I was in the wings.
ball cap, and ridiculous.
I was in the wings trying to get some free food. I ate like 3 pouches of nuts and some chips.
Brett is here because we wanted Brett here. So don't.
And Ben is sick.
And because Ben is sick.
We'll also add Ben is sick. But also because you wanted me here.
Because I wanted you here. And Anna, I cleared with Anna. Anna said that was fine. So you're here. It's all working out. Anyway, thanks for being with us. We have a fascinating show. We have stories that will make you laugh, that will piss you off, that will tell you a little bit about what went on at the United Nations today as well. Check us out TYT Live. That's hashtag TYT Live. To me, growing up, it was pound TYT Live. But we'll call it hashtag for now.
Pound TYT Live is the adult version.
That's well, if you really want to be old, and I've said this before in this space, it was tic-tac-toe board.
Oh, wow.
TYT Live. That before it even had a name, Pound. It was that. In any case, we want to tell you a little bit about what your president did today in New York. The United Nations General Assembly happens annually. Leaders from all over the world converge on Manhattan, Turtle Bay to be precise, to the United Nations, a place that Donald Trump, by the way, throughout his presidential campaign, bemoaned and complained about and said that it should not, even in some circles, exist, that they don't do the job, they need reorganization. Criticized. When he got there yesterday, the first thing he did to the press is he pointed out that, hey, just across the street, I have a very successful building. There's a building that we have. It's a Trump building right across the street. It's a terrific building. So he went in, all about Donald Trump, and I think he'll come out of this, 2 more days. He's not done there till Thursday. He's staying at Trump Tower in New York. Not done until Thursday. But what he did do today was unprecedented, I think. I would say that I adhere and watch and spend a lot of time on boring congressional television. I don't generally look at the General Assembly, but this time I knew that it would be important. This is the first time that this president is facing the leaders of other countries all at once. And it's important because it's his first foray into that diplomatic discussion. And usually the discussions that come out of the United Nations General Assembly are centered around refugees, around working together, about bailing countries out, about healthcare and climate change. And that was not the case with Donald Trump. Today, Donald Trump took this opportunity to talk about sovereignty, and he said that word so many times. And sovereignty is another word for keeping immigrants out, if you want to know the truth. But it's also about talking about American pride, American power, and he wasted no time when talking about his new favorite nemesis, and that's Kim Jong-un of North Korea. Here is Donald Trump in New York today.
Now North Korea's reckless pursuit of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles threatens the entire world with unthinkable loss of human life. It is an outrage that some nations would not only trade with such a regime, but would arm, supply, and financially support a country that imperils the world with nuclear conflict. The United States has great strength and patience. But if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime. The United States is ready, willing, and able, but hopefully this will not be necessary.
Yep, that's Donald Trump talking about. He was there, right, at the green marble podium, calling Kim Jong-un Rocket Man. He did that previously in a tweet. Anna, what do you make of this kind of rhetoric at the United Nations?
Well, the order of sentences in that last statement was interesting because he went from, we will destroy North Korea, implying that we would use our nuclear capability against the country should they cease their, experiments with their weapons. And then he immediately follows it up with Rocket Man.
Yeah.
So he makes one of the most serious statements that you could possibly make at, this meeting. and then follows it up with a childish, label that he's given Kim Jong-un. Look, in the grand scheme of things, who cares what he calls Kim Jong-un? What matters is policy, and what also matters is that we have a leader that we trust to be competent to deal with something that is not only threatening to us and to those living in North Korea, but also threatening to our allies. And I just don't feel that he is worthy of that trust, because he does not strike me as someone who's competent.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think there's one more thing that matters here, too. You're at the United Nations. You're in the middle of this, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but the whole, whether it's a crisis or not with North Korea, we can talk about. But you're in the middle of this, and you're shooting diplomacy out of the way.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, so there's no room. When you call him Rocket Man and you say, if you don't do this, we're just going to blow up your whole country. That means diplomacy is done. And you saw, when you were looking at it, you saw Nikki Haley, the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, and Rex Tillerson, who was the Secretary of State. You saw them there. And when there are other takes of them where they sort of can't, it looks to me, and I'm just reading how they look.
They look concerned.
That's a better way of putting it. That's a nicer way than I was going to say.
Their eyes shoot down as soon as they realize what he's saying. I mean, not to say that they didn't know ahead of time, but it did feel like those moments during, say, the Academy Awards, when the host is doing the monologue and taking pot shots at people in the audience, and then it flashes to some random person, and on their face is just written the expression, don't show my face, right? That's what it felt like. And then to use that kind of language, it felt not like a throwback to any famous speech that we know of someone bridging the gap between nations, using diplomacy, as you say. It felt like, I think it was like 2006, when you had, the leader of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, up there with like Noam Chomsky's book waving it around. and to call him Rocket Man, it feels like he took some kind of like insult, ran it through Google Translator into Korean, then back into American. It felt like the way that Chavez used to call Bush Mr. Danger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're a donkey, Mr. Danger. It felt that weird.
Yeah, and there has been this kind of, there's like precedent. You cite Chavez, there was Fidel Castro showing up with a gun. I mean, there are things that have happened at these General Assemblies and in special addresses to the United Nations. But I can't stop thinking about this being the very first time that he has done this and presenting himself to the world, and this is how he's doing it. That goes to your whole point about trust.
Right. I mean, I had incredibly low expectations for his speech, and he met those low expectations.
Yeah.
So I'm not really shocked by anything. The only thing that is kind of shocking is usually when he says things that are outlandish or worth having some concern about, it's off the cuff. It's not something that's scripted, but he's clearly reading from a prompter there.
That's a great question. I want to ask you, he's reading from a prompter, but I think he saw Kim Jong-un and he said Rocket Man. I
was wondering about that.
I don't know.
Was that written in the script?
Right,
who knows? There's no way of knowing, but it is clear that he is using a teleprompter there, because whenever he does speak off the cuff, he has the vocabulary and communication skills of a third grader. But the other thing that I wanted to quickly mention is, this notion that he's a great deal maker. And I'm not talking about him sitting down and trying to be diplomatic with Kim Jong-un. I'm talking about him making a deal with China in regard to, the trade and the resources that China gives to North Korea. So I see what he's doing there in that speech. He didn't mention China, but he's implying that China's the issue here. They need to, China itself needs to impose sanctions against North Korea. Okay, then you can use diplomacy in that context to convince, Chinese leaders to stop their friendly relationship with North Korea. I mean, that's where, your good deal making could come in and be very useful, but he's not really a good deal maker.
It seems like his strategy is, I'm not the head diplomat. The head diplomat's the Secretary of State or my UN ambassador.
Right. I may soon be your Secretary of State, because people are saying that Tillerson's tired of this whole deal and dealing with Trump.
Right, and it seems like if I were to apply my knowledge of Donald Trump to my interpretation of this speech, it could all be translated into Rex, hold me back.
Right.
Like, I am going to rattle my saber. I'm going to call the guy Rocket Man. I am just as petulant as the boy king of North Korea. And I am going to be that person that Un can identify with, and then Rex can go in and kind of patch things up. even though Rex has been undercut at every turn since he's
and the president leaves no room for diplomacy. So if you're going to sort of pave the way for Rex fix this or Rex do this, by saying we're going to blow you away, and by demeaning the president or the the supreme leader of North Korea in that way, you're taking out, you're undercutting the ability of the Secretary of State and the diplomatic corps to do anything here, but not just here,
right?
In Syria. I mean, in the Iran nuclear deal,
right.
It's all there's a contagion about this that is unprecedented. It seems right now, and then this speech, like all the speeches that Donald Trump gives, campaign speech, right? This is what worked on the trail. If you're standing in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, you're going to say, "We're going to blow that guy away, Rocket Man." Well, not with that accent, right?
Rocket Man had such a positive connotation.
I mean, he's burning out that fuse up there alone.
Okay, yeah, that's Brett's proving that he knows what Elton John is saying in that song because nobody else does, burning up that fuse.
Yeah.
Oh, I think about Family Guy.
Is it burning up the fuse out here
alone? But nobody knows what that is.
That's true.
Right. It's one of those lyrics that nobody knows. I of course, Rocket Richard, Maurice Richard of the Montreal Canadiens, which most of you probably know.
What if it is?
Exactly what I was thinking.
I knew you did.
What if using Rocket Man is the most appropriate deep metaphor you can think of? Because Un is alienated out there, just trying to get a connection with someone. Maybe Trump, he's like bringing out his chops as an English major. Could I fade into the background of this graphic more?
Look at that.
The answer is no.
That's pretty good.
The answer is no at all.
And the frustrating thing about Donald Trump is you don't hear the detractors. You don't hear Republicans saying about that this is irresponsible. You don't hear it enough, certainly, and I know that people are waiting for that. And I'm confident that will come. It did not come today. Lindsey Graham, who you'll recall, Donald Trump gave out his cell phone number during the campaign. Donald Trump made light of his candidacy, which was worthy of being made light of, but he's somebody who Donald Trump has taken to task at different times. Lindsey Graham goes on television. That's what he said.
Every military expert says there is no good military option. They're wrong. There is a military option to destroy North Korea's program and North Korea itself. He's not going to allow President Trump the ability of this madman to have a missile to hit America. If there's going to be a war to stop him, it will be over there. If thousands die, they're going to die over there. They're not going to die here. And he's told me that to my face.
Yeah, that was earlier this summer. We should point out, but this is a consistent message from Lindsey Graham, that told me that to my face, and he is buying into it. Except when he told it to my face, I didn't challenge him.
Yeah, well, I think he's buying into it for a specific reason, and I don't think that Trump leaving out any room for diplomacy is an accident. And what I'm about to say sounds conspiratorial. It's speculation. I want to be clear with our audience. This isn't based in, evidence and reporting, but it's my view of what's going on, because there's a story that we're about to cover after we finish covering this regarding increasing taxpayer money toward the military. And right now there's a good deal of fear-mongering happening among our lawmakers, and it has to do with Iran, it has to do with North Korea, it has to do with these dangerous refugees that are trying to come into the country. And I don't think, my perception is, they're not escalating, the rhetoric or, antagonizing the enemy without a reason. There's a reason, and the reason is to convince Americans to support funneling more of our taxpayer money to the military, even given the fact that we know, without a shadow of a doubt, that there's a tremendous amount of waste going on at the Pentagon. And so I don't know, maybe I'm giving Trump too much credit, because that would indicate that he's actually strategizing.
Well, yeah, which is always tough to do. But,
right.
But it does bring up the question, what you just said, of this whole North Korea story, and whether or not it is the media, that we and the media as a whole are responsible for the escalation of this thing to a certain degree. That there's so much hyperbole out there now about this, that there was not really a threat. These two nations were not at the brink of war, North Korea and the United States. And now, because of the constant, yes, he's testing them. Yes, there are problems with South Korea and North Korea. I'm not making light of the global implications of it and the situations here, but it wasn't as big as it is now. And it wasn't as close as it was now. And you didn't have leaders saying that they're going to do this.
Well, the story wasn't as big as it is now because we didn't have leaders escalating the situation when we don't need to be escalating it, right? There was no, sorry to interrupt you, there was no conversation on cable news where one of the options was to destroy North Korea, because the fact of the matter is North Korea is full of people who are being oppressed, who are innocent, who are doing nothing wrong. They are unfortunately being, they've been taken control by a dictator, and it's been like that for some time now. And so to just, nonchalantly talk about destroying North Korea and murdering innocent people is absurd. I'm sure would break war crimes.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
And also, our allies would be negatively impacted by that as well. And so it just shows either Lindsey Graham has a complete misunderstanding of how things work and what that would really entail, or he does know and he's just the type of person who doesn't care about the ramifications.
He loves the military, Lindsey Graham. He loves the fact that he was a judge advocate general. He loves all that. And it's always been part of what he sells. But I think the point you make is absolutely spot on. I mean, we've been led by fish that have been swimming by the bait for a long time. And now we have one dumb fish who's like, oh, there's a piece of bait, and he bites into it, and then this happens, right?
Yeah.
And then the media covers it, and voraciously. And I think that's what happened.
I don't want to get into a land war in Asia, or, that's from Princess Bride, but I don't want to get into a land war in North Korea. It feels like Kim Jong-Kevin McAllister has been spending the last 70 years booby-trapping that. It's going to be like Home Alone.
Yeah.
I think that'd be terrible.
Yeah, it would be terrible. And he is trying to seduce this into happening to some degree, or at least, this is the campaign Trump again. I mean, I talked about it a second ago. This is the guy who loved, this is what he sold out in America. This is what they bought.
Wasn't that selling it? But remember that strange moment when Trump kind of humanized Kim Jong-un along the campaign trail, where he's like, I get this guy. He's got a powerful dad. He's trying to define himself. He's a pretty smart, sharp cookie or whatever.
Right. Because they're the same person.
They are the same person. That's what's so terrifying about it.
Right.
Is that they'll do the same thing back and forth until something terrible happens.
And their father willed to them an empire. And they've almost both bankrupted it at different times and seen it rise. And the comparison is unbelievable.
So I'm going to regret bringing this up because it's wonky and I don't know. You guys probably won't care, but I don't.
It's about the DNC fraud lawsuit.
No. It's every time we do stories about potential nuclear war, I always think about Kenneth Waltz, he's a political scholar, and he has this theory about nuclear weapons and how arming every country with nuclear capabilities is actually not a bad idea, because most people are rational. They're rational actors. And if you know that your use of nuclear weapons is going to be met with nuclear warfare, then you're much less likely to use those weapons.
Right, but that's when the nature of warfare was considered widely as such, where there were rational actors at the heads of states that had their people's best interests involved.
That's right.
And it wasn't when someone could go just get their hands on one if they were more widely available. It's the same argument with guns. If you get them in the hands of the wrong folks who aren't responsible to anyone but themselves and their wild notions.
I just want to have I want to have a talk with Homeboy and see what he thinks now. Like, what do you think about your theory? This is a long time ago that he wrote about this theory, but it's just fascinating.
Yeah, and listen, nothing's changed. Kim Jong-un's been doing this for a long time, as you said, and now he's got somebody reacting to it, and he knows the threat has been implicit for a long time too. He just hasn't had somebody enunciating it, especially at the United Nations as Donald Trump did today. Let's talk about Donald Trump and the military a little more. Donald Trump went to France, and while there, celebrating, by the way, an occasion, the 100th anniversary of the United States entering World War I at that time, the Great War, and as is sort of customary for these kinds of commemorations, there was a big military spectacle and parade there in France. Well, Donald Trump was so taken with it that he decided and said today to Macron when meeting with the French leader that he wants to do one of those himself. And this is, this typical Trump, right? He thought this was great. It looked great. It's consistent. We'll discuss this in a moment with things that Donald Trump has said in the past. But here is what, if we can put the graphic up here, this is what Donald Trump said about this. It was really so well done, but I came back and one of my early calls were, I think we're going to have to start looking at that ourselves. So we're actually thinking about 4th of July, Pennsylvania Avenue, having a really great parade to show our military strength. But of course, the first thing I thought of is July 4th weekend, he's going to be at the White House now. No. Right? He's going to be in Bedminster. He'll be out of town. He'll be in the Hamptons. He'll be someplace else. But what this speaks to, and this is consistent, this whole idea. Where do people hear these things and see these things? Right? I mean, you see it in black and white films from. And this is, of course, the great celebration in France. But you see them black and white films on the History Channel of people marching up the Champs-Élysées. People, what I mean by people, Nazis, marching up the Champs-Élysées to the Arc de Triomphe when they took Paris. You see these sorts of commemorations in middle 20th century Europe. And Donald Trump sees this, is excited about this, and wants to go ahead and do it. As a matter of fact, he, for his inauguration, asked, this is a commemoration of the 100th anniversary of World War I and our entering, something totally worth commemorating, perhaps, right? When Trump sees this sort of thing, and he wanted to do this at his inauguration. He asked the military. He got a 20-plane flyover. He loves this stuff, but it shows these are the strains of an authoritarian. This is not just, this is America proud. This is scary stuff, the kind of stuff that an authoritarian wants.
And also, if anyone in our audience doesn't buy into the authoritarian angle, which I think is a really great point, also keep in mind that Trump argued that it makes sense to ban transgender military members because they're too costly. Obviously, studies have already indicated that is not the case. Taking them out of the military and replacing them would be insanely costly. But you have the resources, or you're willing to spend the resources on a military parade, which is completely unnecessary, but you're not willing to help pay for the medical bills of men and women who are willing to serve in the military just because you don't like their gender identity. I mean, just think about that for a second. It's so enraging. And the fact that, I don't know how many of his supporters would want something like this, but those military parades ain't free. That's our taxpayer money going toward something that makes Donald Trump feel good about himself, and that's it.
But this is Gold Buildings guy. Gold Buildings guy. I put gold on and in my buildings.
Right.
You think of it as an unnecessary expense. He thinks of it as something that he has to do for branding. This is all a brand initiative for Team Trump.
That's right.
And it's worth it to him because of that. It fits right in with his taste. But it is about, and it's JR, I mean, come into this. This is Make America Great Again, right? This is the coming home from the war, the 40s. This is the kind of thing that Donald Trump would latch onto, irrespective of.
So you read the piece of his statement on it, and I want us to also play the full version because it feeds more into what his motivations are, and also bringing up his plan to bring things into the inauguration. When he planned to bring those military vehicles and members into his inauguration, he asked for pictures from the Pentagon or whatever military source he needed to ask. He says, can you guys send me pictures of things I can use? Not with any kind of flow to it or reason behind it outside of what's going to look good at my inauguration. Right. It's a military slant to it to show my power. So I don't know if we have the video ready to go.
Yeah, this is Macron and Trump.
And pay attention to his full reasons for why he's saying it after seeing what France did.
I was your guest at Bastille Day, and it was one of the greatest parades I've ever seen. It was 2 hours on the button, and it was military might, and I think a tremendous thing for France and for the spirit of France. And people don't know what great warriors they are in France, but when you see that and you see all the victories, it was a tremendous thing. And to a large extent, because of what I witnessed, we may do something like that on July 4th in Washington, down Pennsylvania. I don't know, we're going to have to try and top it. But we had a lot of planes going over, we had a lot of military might, and it was really a beautiful thing to see. When I came back, and one of my early calls were, I think we're going to have to start looking at that ourselves. So we're actually thinking about 4th of July, Pennsylvania Avenue, having a really great parade to show our military strength.
One of my first calls when I got back was to plan a parade.
And show our military. And so again, he was shut down for the inauguration thing. So he's like, here's the way I can still do it and make it seem like it's for everyone else but me, to show our military strength, our might. What does that have to do with your inauguration, number one? Our military strength to who? Who's infiltrating your inauguration for this show of power? It's all about showing power. And France did it. I was so impressed because I'm a 10-year-old at a parade. And I'm got giddy. I was like, oh my God, I can do this too.
Right.
And after doing it, after wanting to do it, I do it better than you.
Yeah. And the arrogance to do it on July 4th in the middle of impeachment hearings.
What? I love parades, though. Honestly, I love them. Have you ever been to a football? I guess not a basketball game because those are indoors, but a football game where there's a flyover?
Yeah, that's cool.
I think it's super cool. And that's what I thought was awesome about when he asked on his inauguration. It was like, can I have tanks? And they were like, no, those will tear up the streets. When a lot of tanks actually disperse the pressure a lot more than cars do, so it is less of a footprint on the actual street. They're
Can't
like,
we just get him like a G.I. Joe kit?
but then, yeah.
Just like have him
CGI, just CGI. Just show him a scene from a movie.
Exactly. He'll be, oh, that was fantastic.
But you know they were like, listen, we know what you want. We know what this idiot wants. We'll give him a couple planes. We'll do a flyover. He'll be happy.
That's true, and that's how you feel they appease him constantly.
Yes,
right.
That's exactly the point.
People just to give them a little
like
run with it. Can you imagine? U.S. presidents are allowed and required to plan their own funerals. So part of what they do is they sit down very early in their presidency, and they can amend it at any time to plan their state funerals. But every president does it. Can you imagine what his plan
I don't.
is entail?
I mean, that is.
The
amount of money that's going to go into that funeral. It'll be
the flyovers and the military and the might and the everything.
And if you're at the funeral, you have to cry and fall over his casket. But does that sound like someone else?
All these things sound exactly like that. Yeah. All the images that are summoned are the images that you associate with dictatorial regimes where people on pain of death are forced to, oh my God, like freakishly flail about in the street.
No, it's unbelievable. So I thought of that when I heard this story. It's got to stop, man. It's got to stop.
It does feel like all of his ideas could be an episode of The Apprentice, though. Like planning the parade does sound like a challenge, and who's the project manager? And as much as it sounds like he's thinking big, he just ends up thinking so small.
Well, I'm proud to say that my dislike of Donald Trump predates his becoming president or candidate, so I never watched The Apprentice because I couldn't stand him for most of my life. We're going to take a break now. When we come back, we're going to talk about what Anna previewed, the military budget. We're going to talk about refugees. We have a great show ahead, and stay with us. Hashtag TYT Live. You can join us on Twitter.
I saw a picture of John. I was like, look at this fucking badass Viking he met on his trip. I was like, oh wait, that's John.
Yeah.
His beard is so gross. I swear to God, I didn't recognize him.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was like a dude from up there, like a Viking-looking dude from up there.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, we've got our own Viking. Look at Johnny Pie. Johnny Pie, we miss you, big guy. And he was at Svalbard. We were talking about how he was going to go get the grains if he's the last person on Earth, and he's going to, or among the last people on that ship, and repopulate the Earth after North Korea. At least he's got the grains. He knows where it is. He can find it. Mm-hmm. Don't worry. Humanity will be saved. Yet again, by a white male. God, I love it.
Hey, Jen, what's up?
And my VCR keeps flashing 12, but it's not even midnight. Go.
The Young Turks have been nominated for a Streamy, and the only way that we can win in this category, Show of the Year, is if you guys vote for us. As always, we need TYT Army to back us up, support us, and help us win this award. Now, the way that you vote is actually very easy. All you need to do is cast a vote by tweeting using the hashtag TYT for Streamies, and it obviously has to be a public Twitter account with a public tweet, and you can tweet once a day, every day, up until the end of voting. So you can start right now, and if you can vote for us, if you want to vote for us, it would be greatly appreciated.
We're also up for news and culture for the Young Turks. So Show of the Year and news and culture show for Streamies. So thank you guys. Thanks for basically getting us nominated. And if you guys do this, and we can actually win. And retweets count. TYT Army is obviously way too strong. Let's go get some more awards and rub it in the right wing space.
Welcome back to the Young Turks. Michael Shore here with Anna Experian, Brett Ehrlich, and J.R. Jackson, discussing a few things that have happened in New York, a little bit of military in Washington. We're going to get to that. However, I want to invite you to go to hashtag TYT Live and join the conversation about this show on Twitter. I want to read some of the tweets that you would find there, which kind of ruins it. You don't really need to go if I'm going to read them, but go anyway. Chris Duran says the U.S. population of the world. This is the U.S. population telling the world President Trump is defective. We're trying to return him, but Russia won't give us the receipt. People just saying, Teely Quark says he was embarrassing at the UN, obviously. Donald Trump just ruined everyone's favorite Elton John song, which that's not my favorite Elton John song, but I understand why people would think that.
What's your favorite Elton John song? The public wants to know.
You think so? I would say Burn Down the Mission, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road.
Crocodile Rock is actually the answer.
Is that right? Philadelphia Freedom?
Nope.
The Tony Danza song? Is there one?
Yeah, it's Hold Me Closer, Tony Danza.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Candle in the Wind.
Right.
Candle to Crocodile Rock.
Now, Bart Kyle, who works with us, we talked a little bit about the lyric that Brett showed off that he knew, burning out his fuse out here alone, a reference on the isolation of fame, which could also cause someone to burn out by living in the limelight. So that's a little bit of information you would not have known.
And get faded.
Right. So go in. Next break, we'll read your tweets. I love doing it. There's one that we didn't get to. The panel keeps dancing around. This is Brian. The panel keeps dancing around equating Trump with dictatorial regimes and authoritarians. It looks like a duck and quacks. Yes, it does. I don't think we danced around it. By the way, you can do that work yourselves, but I think we danced right into it, Brian. But
He's a ductator.
Thank you.
Obviously, by that logic, he's a ductator.
Well, you can't have a military parade unless you have a well-funded military, and the United States Senate made sure that was what Donald Trump was going to get. Donald Trump asked for a lot of money, and he got a lot of money. The U.S. military budget, the Senate backed a defense policy bill pumping $700 billion into the military. Here's a little breakdown because I'm terrible with numbers. Approved by the Armed Services Committee by a 27-0 vote in late June, the overall Senate bill provides $604 billion for core Pentagon operations such as buying weapons and paying troops, and another $60 billion for wartime missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and elsewhere. Trump's budget request sought $603 billion for basic functions and $65 billion for overseas missions, so they shortchanged them $28 billion. But what's $28 billion when you don't have a parade yet? Wait till you see next year's request. This is, what struck me about this, listen, these bills happen all the time. They're very, very contentious most of the time. This year's it wasn't 27-0 the Armed Service Committee. And I think this is the type of thing that members of Congress don't like voting against because it can be used against you on the campaign trail. And point of fact, this money is necessary to keep the military going. What isn't necessary is the second part of the number, which is all those missions, and that's another story entirely. But in this argument that the Republicans are making about health care, they're saying that single-payer health care is the wrong way for America to go. Mm-hmm. This is unchecked, single-payer, $700 billion of expenditure. This is single payer. This is what it looks like. So we can pay for our military and our defense in a single payer kind of way. We can damn well do it for health care. If the right to defend your country is a right that we're all born with, so too is the right to remain healthy throughout our lives.
They're both to keep us alive.
Right.
They're both to keep us alive, but there is a significant amount of waste in the military, and it was something that Trump criticized when he was campaigning, something that he claimed that he was going to stop when he was campaigning, but he is only adding to that waste. Of course, he wants to do that military parade, which would take taxpayer money, right. So that's an example of waste. Our taxpayer money shouldn't go to that, especially when, people in Congress and the president himself keep making arguments against universal health care. And every once in a while, of course, the topic of Social Security comes up, and, how is it going to remain solvent? How are we going to do it? How are we going to be able to make these Social Security payments? How about you don't spend an additional $700 billion on the military, which is incredibly wasteful. So look, why do I think it's wasteful? A lot of you already know that money goes to private contractors, when in reality we don't need to pay these exorbitant fees to these contractors to get things done in the Pentagon. But just last December, if you guys can remember, okay, I didn't mean to rhyme there, the Washington Post...
Could have said November.
Last December, the Washington Post published an incredible piece regarding the Pentagon and how they tried to cover up a study that showed $125 billion in waste, okay? So this study, please go back and read it. It's incredible. Pentagon buries evidence of $125 billion in bureaucratic waste. So this study is done, and, the Defense Department could have saved this money by actually looking at the results and doing something to cut the waste, cut the bureaucracy. There's obviously money going to things that we don't need in the military anymore. And instead of doing that, the Pentagon realized, oh wait, if this becomes public, then Congress is much less likely to increase funding to the Defense Department. And so let's just bury it, pretend like it doesn't exist, and continue on with this unnecessary waste. Okay. In that same piece, Trump is quoted as saying he's going to stop it, right? He's going to come in, it's wasteful, look at what the Obama administration has done, they should have done something about this. He's supposedly going to do something about it. He gets elected into office, and then what does he call for? More funding to the Defense Department, instead of doing what so-called fiscal conservatives claim that they want to do, which is cut spending and cut waste in these specific departments. Anyway, it's just frustrating. We pay taxes so our government can actually take care of us, and they do the exact opposite. They fearmonger about Iran, completely unnecessary. We got into the details of the Iran deal yesterday and how they are complying. There's no reason to, escalate tensions with them. The fearmongering about North Korea, all of this stuff is going on, or the escalation of conflict with North Korea through Trump's rhetoric. That's all being done on purpose because they want more money for these private contractors, and that's it. Who cares about your Social Security? Who cares that you've been paying into it your entire life? Who cares about your health insurance and your health care coverage? Who cares about, affordable housing and making sure that people aren't living on the streets? We got to fund the military because these private contractors got to make money. That's where our taxpayer money goes to.
Yeah, well put. Additionally, I would add that if you're taking $700 billion from the American taxpayers for the military, where we know there's waste, and I should say, if there is single-payer healthcare, socialized medicine in this country, there's going to be waste. That's just what happens. There's waste everywhere in government, but it's still better, right? So if you're looking at this defense bill, you're going to see a ton of waste, but the VA. There's no talk about the VA here. And again, this is a blanket bill. It's unfettered. It's untouched by amendments that could have talked about North Korea. There's nothing in here about the ban on transgender in the military. So I think that's probably a good thing. Though the Appropriations Committee is going to get this, and they're going to talk about where the money is going to go. But there's no talk about the VA, and that to me is a puzzle. But that's one thing that's glaring, and Trump talked about it on the campaign trail the entire time.
This is what always sticks out to me, and I've said it a few times already. Mick Mulvaney, months into the administration, he was pitching their budget and saying things he wants to cut when he was slashing everything. When it went down to the Meals on Wheels, that was one of the headlines that made the Meals on Wheels thing that he was ready to cut because no one really needs that. There was one line he said where he said, "I can't force a construction worker in Ohio that has nothing to do with this single mother's her entitlements or her children's education. I can't make him pay taxes or his tax money to go to her because F her," right? But then I can make everyone who's disagreeing with these wars we keep starting, or disagrees with the waste that we do in building more war machines and funding more war companies to do these things. I can force you to do that. And he said it openly. I said, why can you force me to do that? What if I raise my hand and say, no, I don't want to fund your wars anymore. No, I don't want to fund your friends' companies anymore. I don't have that say anymore. But that Ohio worker, that construction worker has all the right to say, you know what? F that mother in Kansas. Screw her. I don't care. Don't want money go to her. Why does it work that way?
And by the way, this is a perfect, illustration of a point that keeps coming up on the show, where while the government takes our taxpayer money and uses it toward this type of waste, right, to make private contractors wealthy, they distract us by attacking that mother living in poverty. They distract us by talking about, the others, they're trying to come into the country and take your resources. They distract us with the wall and Mexicans and Muslims and black people. They distract us and try to get us to attack one another while behind the scenes, this kind of story, I mean, sure, major news outlets are covering it, which is good. But do you think that this is a topic of discussion among most Americans? Hell no, it's not. Because this is not the kind of story that gets talked about over and over again in the media. Charlottesville, I understand, you should talk about it. But this is the kind of stuff that really goes on that Americans should be outraged about.
Yeah, all those military threats are nameless, faceless, and scarier than a mom, And then another rhetorical aspect of this is it seems to me like the only way we can get the government really to fund anything is in terms of it being a war.
Absolutely.
So the war, the military spending, right, the most obvious one, but whenever they declare war on stuff, they declare a war on drugs.
Right.
That's not the same as the other wars you're fighting, but in order to communicate their message so everyone can really understand that you're being attacked by something, it's the war on drugs, it's the war on poverty. Maybe rhetorically, when it goes to trying to get healthcare changed, it's the war on sickness, or we're attacking them, bomb sickness. It's branded. Shoot sickness in the face, or something like that, something more aggressive and affiliated with military get military exercises.
Yeah.
Exercise has to do with healthcare. I'm saying a branding initiative.
Well, I think we need more.
And that's what Trump can do, right?
Yeah, and that's it.
We just need more lawmakers that would want, that type of policy and would want to use that kind of branding in order to get, beneficial policies passed for Americans, as opposed to this kind of, increase of funding toward the Defense Department. But I do want to just quickly note that, look, this is not an issue this isn't just a criticism of those on the right, because, you look at the number in the Senate, the number of votes, I should say, and it's 89 to 8, meaning that there are Democrats who voted in favor of it. And look.
Well, I should point out, just politically, this is the geeky part of it, before you continue. A lot of Democrats voted against it, a lot for it, because there was no amendment process, because the Republicans couldn't do worse things to it with their majority. So leadership said, hey, let's just push this through, because then they don't get North Korea, then they don't get transgender, and that goes away. Mm-hmm. So in a way, it was a defensive posture that a lot of Democrats took too. I don't need to take the air out of your balloon, because what you're about to say is really true, because it goes on. Yeah,
I think that there are other ways to fight, other proposals that Democrats think are damaging to transgender military members and some of the other more disgusting proposals that have been pushed for by Trump and his cronies. But, we need fighters. We need people in government who look at this kind of money and realize, no, my constituents, the people that I was voted to represent, need to be represented, and giving contracts to private military contractors is not serving their best interest. Fear-mongering about, these potential threats is not serving their best interest. These are people who are losing their homes, who are being evicted from their apartments because rent is going up and they can't keep up with the cost of inflation because wages are set. These are real issues that Americans are dealing with, right? So how many people need to live on the streets before these lawmakers wake up and realize our taxpayer money should be used for taking care of our own citizens?
Right. The triple cynical way to look at it is that as it is now, it's confusing. You can attribute blame to certain people, and that's enough for the equilibrium not to sting as much. And if you're cynical about in the wings, in the shadows, which defense contractors or healthcare professionals are making money off it, the status quo ends up maintaining itself just because it's so confusing and difficult to affect change in any effective way.
Which is true. We're going to do? We're going to take a break. We talked a lot about that. We have a couple of important things that I do want to get to. We all do, especially about the horrific things that have happened to the people of the Caribbean, having to do with these storms that have come through. And we could talk about climate change. Hashtag TYT Live on Twitter. We'll see you in a minute.
I'm going to tell you a story, and then I want you to tell me what you think about the way I reacted to the situation, and if you thought it was acceptable.
Guilty. Oh, wait, I gotta wait for the story.
I know Anna Kasparian has some stuff to say, and the world needs to hear it.
But then he became woke man. I hate it.
I love it.
Susan and I used to do this trick where we would elongate the videos so that we would look skinnier.
That is the most positive drug dealing story I've ever heard of.
Bears don't give a fuck. I trust you guys, audience. Don't let me down.
You don't believe in ghosts? Talking about pussy. No.
Hey, we got Spawn to TYT. What is this puzzle spot?
Oh, death.
Did you want to poop outside? No, I poop here. It's fine because I bury it. And you know what happens in the water? Turns frogs gay.
And they can't stand the establishment. And then I slipped and fell on my ass.
Guess I gotta get comfortable here.
That is tomorrow's show, Jay. When your time is up, what wouldn't you do for just one more day.
I'm going to try to have sex with you. If you don't want it right now, just roll up a newspaper and hit.
Hottest club I've ever been to is my bedroom. People often say that you are the Jasmine of TYT.
Yep.
Please, I am not with you, baby. You gotta let me go.
Oh God, this hurts so bad.
You're alive. You're alive. The last day is not any more valuable than today.
What's the favorite thing you have in common with your daughter?
I was going to say sex, but I can't relate that. You said I had small hands. They're not small. I never heard that one before.
Welcome back to TYT Sports. Jason and Francis here. This is where everybody has to listen. Welcome to TYT Sports, everybody. I am your host, Francis Maxwell. Jason here. Welcome to TYT Sports. Turks and Jerks. TYT Sports. Steph Curry signed with Under Armour. Tom Brady's mad, by the way. Can you hear me? Back on TYT Sports. Actually, maybe look at the description box below instead of lying about the description box below. And it's a throw another picture of the UK bacon. And another. Then if I throw another one, you're really
Hi, welcome back to Young Turks. Michael Schur, Brett Ehrlich, Anna Kasparian, and J.R. Jackson. I am going to read some of your tweets because that's what I get to do when I present these stories. And we're going to talk about some of this horrible devastation that's happening in the Caribbean. But before we get to that, here are our live tweets. Matthew Reed, I haven't read any of these, so if they're bad, it's because I didn't read them. Conservative economics is not about balancing budgets or reducing spending. It is about socializing losses and privatizing gains.
That's right.
Which is correct and deep and true. I'm a derpy panda, which is the reason I couldn't get that name is because you took it. What we call waste, others call it profit. Our country values profits over everything else. Right, but there's also, it's both, but that's a good point. Daniel Pareja, the worst part is that mother living in poverty in Kansas voted GOP and will almost certainly vote GOP again. There's no proof to the contrary, right? I mean, that seems to be the way we're going. Yuri, the party that missed a $2 trillion math error from Mulvaney, doesn't get to criticize a plan that will actually help people. That's true. Luis Figueroa, too bad the war on Christmas didn't get as much funding. Yeah, that's your war on thing.
Yeah.
They're the war on morons.
Hey,
how are
great.
you? Thank you. Vance, maybe we should...
really great.
You like it?
Yeah.
Keep
them.
Just
keep them.
Will keep me. Vance, maybe we should declare a war on climate change and try not to trick these idiots into fighting the fossil fuel companies. Yeah, the war on climate change needs to happen, and there's no better segue, thank you, Vance, to our next story. Hurricane, there are so many storms brewing in the Caribbean, and I think it's important that we talk about some of the devastation. Hurricane Maria, which reached hurricane status Category 5, went back to 4, and now apparently is picking up. This I can't confirm, but before we went on there, picking up to 5 again. Wreaked its havoc on the island of Dominica in the Caribbean. It's a small island, about 80,000 people, and these islands, like last week, Antigua and Barbuda, that suffered the same fate, especially Barbuda in Hurricane Irma. It's happening again now. This is Roosevelt Skerrit. Roosevelt Skerrit is the Prime Minister of Dominica, and he said last night, after being rescued from his home, he said, "So far we have lost all what money can buy and replace," which is unbelievable. I mean, that's everything. My greatest fear for the morning, and this was last night, will wake to news of serious physical injury and possible deaths as a result of likely landslides triggered by persistent rains. It's an incredible thing because we don't know if his premonitions came through, because all communication to the island as of this morning was cut off. They had no way of communicating with the outside world. If you're in Florida, you can drive to Georgia, you can drive inland, you can do all sorts of things. When you're on a small island in the middle of the Caribbean, there's no place you can go. Of course, it's easy. We talk about climate change. I feel like sometimes we're the only ones who talk about it. We talk about it so much. Easy to blame it, right? There seem to be storms. We've gone through JKL, and M, and we've had storm after storm after storm. And so I wanted to find out if this was related to climate change. And what they're saying is that yes, obviously it's related to climate change. The changes that have happened to our climate have made these storms more devastating, though their frequency. And we'll hear this from Wayne Drash. Changes in our planet's atmosphere did not cause hurricanes Harvey or Irma, and presumably Maria, but the consensus among scientists is that the effects of climate change, such as rising sea levels and warmer oceans, made those storms far more destructive than they would have been in previous decades. And so keep going. Thus, the rainfall levels and wind speeds during tropical storms are increasing, says Wayne Drash. A 7-inch rise in sea levels over the past century adds to the resulting flooding threat. Mm-hmm. So everything that a hurricane brings, nobody is saying that climate change causes hurricane, because before the climate changed, make the climate great again. Before, when it was great, it was not. We would have hurricanes.
Yeah, we always had hurricanes, like this, right? So anyone who uses that argument is missing the point. It's not about, all of a sudden we have hurricanes now. It's about the severity of the storms. It's about the amount of rainfall. It's about, the rising sea levels, and also the moisture and the heat that again exacerbates the situation. And so, back in the day, you would hear about storms like this, and they would refer to it as what? The 500, once every 500 years.
Storm.
Right. And now we have major storms that cause severe damage to our country as well as other countries every year. And so, it's going to get worse. And we're going to continue ignoring it. We pulled out of the climate agreement, Paris Climate Agreement.
And when you look, Brett, we want to say something about that.
It's just, we're not doing anything to cover our bases in the event that all the scientists are right.
Right.
And so every action it seems that we are taking is leading us further away from their admonitions instead of closer in line with their recommendations.
And we're the only country in the world that debates this. Right. That's the thing. Only in America do we debate whether or not this is happening, and why, right? To protect the fossil fuel companies, right? To protect the fact that we are part of destroying the environment. We're not alone destroying the environment, but we are really powerful to help fix it, and the starting point to that is acknowledging it. The starting point is getting back into the Paris Climate Accord and joining the world community on this thing rather than pulling back. And, on the day that Trump addressed the United Nations, this wasn't a big topic there, right? That's the place to talk about this.
Well, yeah, and I don't know, the central challenge in getting people to affect policy that addresses climate change issues is that it's not a pressing threat. It's the kind of thing that when you have a scientist stand in front, they say things that are very sciencey, and that's disengaging for the audience, and then they say, here are models that we've played out over dozens of years, that's further down the line. And anything that people want to get done, that get you to vote on, involves some kind of pressing issue, such as, this year we can make this much money if we open up this field to be drilled or fracked. So that is the pressing issue that gets folks more excited about making changes. And the difficulty here is we are looking at things that are more intense because of higher sea temperatures. That's the one thing they teach you in weather and storms about hurricanes, is that they feed off warmer waters, and you need look no further than where the hurricane goes from Category 3 to Category 4. It does that over the warm waters of the Gulf, and it loses power over the land or over colder water. That's just how it works. And if you're raising the temperature of the water, barring any like drastic increase in temperature aloft, you're going to have huge ass hurricanes. And the trouble is everyone's trying to shake these folks and say, this is the pressing thing. This is what it looks like. This is what it feels like. The sea levels have always risen.
Mm-hmm.
But again, and I think this was covered last week on the show, where it was like folks are saying this is not the time to talk about it.
It's so frustrating. It's like the United States is the Cersei Lannister in Game of Thrones, and like the White Walkers are coming, but we're in complete denial about it, right? And it's so frustrating.
This is right.
I know.
Right.
Sorry.
I know what she's talking about.
But you know, I watched that show, and I'm like, the White Walkers, it's climate change. That's what they are. Anyway, but look, I hear what you're saying about it being not being a pressing matter for most Americans, which is why I think a lot of people here are able to just kind of like brush it under the rug and pretend like it's not an issue. Because here's another thing. There's another pressing matter that, you know, I think takes priority over doing something about climate change, and that is the issue of jobs. And I remember having, this is anecdotal, but I remember having a conversation with a young guy on a plane, liberal guy, who's an engineer on an oil rig. And so, politically speaking, he's liberal, right? We talked about a variety of issues, but when it came to the issue of climate change, it was interesting because he acknowledged it, but he doesn't want to do anything about it, because that means that he's got to go find another job. He's in a very cushy position right now, working for, I believe, Exxon. And when it comes to feeding your family, that's always going to take priority over doing something that's going to benefit the planet. But here's the thing. If you're worried about national security, if you're worried about the cost of food, if you're worried about the refugee crisis that, you know, we're dealing with in the Middle East, all of those issues will become exacerbated moving forward. And we see it get worse every year.
Well, you know, one of the knocks against this, and we're going to have to move on in a second, I mean, one of the knocks against this climate change as an issue has always been that it's a tomorrow issue, and tomorrow issues don't play politically, and they don't, like Anna just said, people vote their pocketbooks, people think about where their next meal is coming from, where their next job is, where their security is. It's a tomorrow issue, except that now it's a today issue, and that is why running into this wall of attitudes that comes from the other party on this, the party that's standing in the way of these things, and Donald Trump and his administration are standing in the way of this. It's really, really difficult, because it is a today issue, and it's not the same type of thing as it used to be. I wish we could talk more about this, but we have one more story that I want to get to today. The Trump administration and the U.S. Geological Survey, by the way, you should look and see where they lead you when you want to talk about climate change. They'll lead you right into a dead end. But the one other thing that we can say is that another denial that the Trump administration is putting into play is a denial about the positive impact of refugees in this country. And as Trump is at the UNGA and he's talking to these countries, refugees and the treatment of refugees is a subject that always comes up. He's going to be there Wednesday and Thursday. He's going to get an earful from a lot of these other leaders about the way that Americans treat refugees. But there is a study, and I want to bring this up, that found that refugees contributed an estimated $269 billion in revenues. And that's not $269. It's $269 billion in revenues to all levels of government between 2005 and 2014. That's 9 years through the payment of federal, state, and local taxes. Overall, this report estimated that the net fiscal impact of refugees was positive over the 10-year period at $63 billion. $63 billion is exactly the number that Donald Trump asked for to go into Afghanistan, or the Senate voted for to continue wars in Afghanistan and Iran and Iraq. So $63 billion is what refugees are creating in this country. Though the Trump administration is rejecting those numbers.
Yeah.
They're saying there's a net effect to that. They're saying under the refugee program, the federal government brings tens of thousands of entrants into the United States on top of existing legal immigration flows who are instantly eligible for time-limited cash benefits and numerous non-cash federal benefits, including food assistance through SNAP, medical care, and education, as well as a host of state and local benefits. So they are saying that they're a drain on the American people, on the American economy. The facts prove otherwise.
The facts do prove otherwise, because since they're refugees, they're more likely to take jobs that average Americans don't want to take.
Right.
And I know that people are in denial about that, but that is what happens. They do pay state taxes, federal taxes, sales taxes if they're in a state that has sales tax. So they do contribute to the economy, and it's a significant amount. And so if the argument is, no, they're going to drain our resources, that's just a flat-out lie. And the Trump administration tried to hide this study. They tried to, completely pretend like it didn't exist. And it reminded me of what Nixon did with the Schaefer report back when he was president. During the Nixon administration, he really wanted to ramp up the war on drugs. He wanted to go after people who were using marijuana. And so he commissioned a study that was headed by Governor Raymond Schaefer at the time. So Raymond Schaefer goes in, has this commission, they do the study, they find out that marijuana is actually not a public health concern. It's actually not something worth wasting resources on and adding to this war on drugs. And Nixon didn't like the results because he wanted to discriminate against black people, right? He wanted to go after Mexicans who were caught with possession of pot. So he's like, oh, Schaefer report, okay, yeah, that's great. Let's move on with our lives. Okay, so it's just what Trump's doing with this information from this study just reminds me a lot of what Nixon did. And in this case, you are playing with people's lives. These are people who not only, we're thinking about them as numbers, we're thinking about what's in it for us? Like, keep in mind, these are people's lives that we're messing with.
Right. And then, when they talk about refugees, they talk about the negative effect, they also talk about this looming threat of terrorism, that there are folks that are slipping through the borders, but you have a net positive here that you could apply to some kind of betterment of your screening, double secret probation, procedures that you have put in place to vet who's coming into the country. So not only are refugees a booming business,
right,
but they pay for the upkeep of that business if you are earnestly meaning what you are saying, which is that we want to make sure that the people who are coming in are properly vetted. You have a budget for that, and it's baked into refugees themselves.
You've turned a profit. Isn't that what all you ever want to do? They've turned a $63 billion profit. You'd think the refugee business would be something they would be jumping on because of that alone. And listen, these stories are connected. You have a report from scientists saying what's going on with the climate, and it's being tossed aside by the Trump administration. You have a report saying that refugees create $63 billion in profit for this country, and the Trump administration is saying that's not true. That doesn't count. Keep these people in check, folks. Thanks for being with us. I'm going to be back with Anna tomorrow. Brett and Anna are going to be here for the second hour, where they'll have fabulous stories that I'm not really qualified to talk about, apparently. And go to TYT Live with the hashtag in front of it and be part of the conversation. Thanks.
If they're small, something else must be small. I guarantee you there's no problem. I guarantee you. You said I had small hands? They're not smaller. I never heard that one before. I have 5 minutes. Explain the Facebook. Go.
Aaron Wysocki, the commander of the armies of the East. So for those who don't know, Aaron is actually Jank's favorite employee.
Aaron, what do you like better? The rabies or the rabies? Go. And I want to do a YouTube live clip, but not live.
I think a lot of people at TYT, and certainly in the audience, don't know, is that without Aaron, none of this happens.
It's all because of me.
So, Aaron, what would you do to surface the Young Turks, as they say?
Well, the first thing I did around that is we didn't have a video podcast back in those days. It was only a audio version, and I wanted I wanted to watch it at work in video form, so I just created the video podcast. So this is the free version of the video podcast that still exists today. I created that from scratch. So I would take the YouTube clip and rip it illegally back then off of YouTube and just put it up on iTunes.
What were the things you did to popularize the Young Turks?
So one of the very early things that I liked was not necessarily the show, it was Jank's blogs. I really enjoyed reading those blogs, and I wanted to share them as widely as possible. So at the time, there was a big wave of what they called social bookmarking back then. And so what it meant was like you pull links from, this is Reddit, what Reddit is today. It was much more popular back then, and there were many different websites.
It wasn't until just a couple years ago when Jank and I were traveling together, we would share a hotel room.
Yeah.
2 grown men sharing a little hotel room. I was like, how much longer do we have to do this?
You're going to be in there much longer?
No, seriously. I'm like, oh, geez, he's in the bathroom again. So I have to go downstairs and use the lobby bathroom. Like that kind of stuff. Like that's family that we had, right? I mean, but I think
that was such a smart decision, though, because you know what it did? You found people that were dedicated to the company, and in a startup, in those early days, you need to find people like that.
Absolutely.
Welcome back to the Young Turks. Anna Kasparian and Brett Ehrlich with you. Brett's going to stick around for the post game. I didn't even ask you if you would or could.
Oh, you have to, I thought.
Yeah, well, yeah, you have to.
I didn't know it was an option. If it was an option, I would never be on a post game. I'd be out living my life, cruising the streets, drinking some brews, then Ubering home because that's responsible. But since I have to, yeah. I'll do it.
Have to. It's gonna
I'm trying my wedding ring back on because I left mine at home. I left the house in such a rush this morning I couldn't find it. But I did find a rubber band, so I've been doing that. I'm new to this.
Yeah.
Watch our old post game on.
Did this make you forced to make sure that he's going to stay on today? That I have to be here for the post game is because you just saw what he's done to himself?
Yes, I want to do an update to a post game that we did last week. It was a fan fave. Just keeping it real. That doesn't mean everyone loved it, but a lot of people did. So we'll do a little follow-up to
Everyone loved it, man.
Did
everyone?
I don't know. I think it's hard to get like consensus on anything. So I'm sure there were some people who didn't like it. But nonetheless, I think overall people enjoyed it. All right, real quick, I want to read some TYT Lives, and then I want to get right into the stories because there's a lot, and I want to make sure we do as much as possible. Opinionated Whore writes in on Twitter and says, if they did care about job creation, referring to the Trump administration and Republicans, we'd be pumping billions into clean energy and infrastructure to cope with climate change. So that's exactly right. California right now is doing pretty great things with renewable energy. It's creating jobs. It's obviously also very beneficial to the environment. But, oh well. Eric says, Brett is way overdressed.
Thank you. You should have seen Pop Trigger today, where I wore predominantly nothing.
Jeez.
Mostly nipple hair.
Okay. All right. I just got a printout of the updated death toll in Mexico, so I want to get right to that story. It's pretty devastating. All right. A powerful earthquake has struck a town near Mexico City, and so far, as of this moment, the death toll has reached 100 people. It was a magnitude 7.1 earthquake, and we do have some footage that we will toss to right now as B-roll as I, give you some more details on what's going on. So these videos were actually shared to us by a viewer by the name of Jorge Oropesa. So I want to thank him for sharing this with us. And that is, a scene featuring people on, these tourist boats, and you can also see some damage there. The highways are destroyed. There are buildings that have been destroyed. During the quake, more than 20 buildings and other structures in Mexico City fell, including at least 2 schools, officials said, crushing cars and trapping some people inside. It also came less than 2 weeks after the most powerful earthquake in Mexico in a century, a magnitude 8.1 quake that killed at least 90 people, destroyed thousands of homes, and was felt by tens of millions of people in Mexico and in Guatemala. So the incredible thing is that this earthquake happened on the anniversary of a huge earthquake that occurred in Mexico City in 1985. It killed as many as 10,000 people in Mexico. And so there were individuals doing earthquake drills as this quake hit, which is amazing. And it's also devastating. I mean, all these natural disasters are striking at once, and, people are losing their homes, they're losing their lives, and I mean, I don't know what else to say about it other than it's just so incredibly depressing.
There are a lot of factors that go into, because we're both from the Valley, and we lived through the Northridge earthquake of 1994, and that was a 6.8 earthquake. Things to know about the Richter scale is it's an exponential scale. It's not like a linear scale. Mm-hmm. So the bigger it is over, a number, it actually gets exponentially larger. So a 7.1 quake is much stronger than a 6.8 quake. Another aspect of it that goes into consideration is the time of day. The Northridge earthquake was at 4:31 in the morning,
right,
and people were in their homes, as opposed to earthquakes like this one, and then there was one in San Francisco in the 80s during a World Series game where people are out and about.
Right.
And each situation brings its own dangers, not to mention the location and the kind of what's underneath the city and where a city is built. So when you talk about Mexico City and earthquakes, a lot of people are more afraid. There had been reports from the previous earthquake where folks, even though that was off the coast to the south, people felt it in Mexico City, and out of fear they did what they do in Mexico City, which is more often run out into the street, because underneath Mexico City, a lot of it is built on a lake bed as opposed to hard bedrock, which lends itself more to stable construction. So there's a lot of factors that go into it that, you see them all play out at once, and it increases the devastation, not to mention all the collateral issues like gas leaks that may be triggered, as you saw fires, and then buildings that, depending on when they were created and built, are engineered to withstand quakes like this or not. And then you'll see different pockets that just randomly suffered more devastation than others based on, the geological underpinnings of that site.
Exactly, yeah. So, unfortunately, the death toll is expected to rise as the story develops. This earthquake did strike today in the afternoon, and so obviously these are preliminary reports. We'll have more information, more details as the story develops. But it's amazing. Last night there was an earthquake in Los Angeles. It was small. I mean, no damage, no deaths, no nothing. But we're seeing these natural disasters all over the place right now, and it's concerning. Obviously, they're caused by different things.
It's just, and then also psychologically, it seems like it all is happening at once, and the effect that has on everybody. Also, the aftershock. So this is not the only quake that will happen. I mean, this came 2 weeks after the most recent quake, and then when there is any kind of earthquake, the immediate thing you think of is this a foreshock or the main event. If it's a 7.1 earthquake, immediately all the seismologists say there might be a larger one just around the corner. But even if there's not, I remember during the Northridge quake, there 5.5 earthquakes were pretty much the norm for the next week.
That's right. I remember. We were sleeping outside in the front yard.
Yeah, we had friends' RV down the street making hot chocolate for everybody.
Yeah. Anyway, heart goes out to everyone in Mexico who's affected by this, and we will keep you guys updated on the story as it develops. All right. Yesterday we covered a story regarding the protests that were taking place in St. Louis and the number of people who were arrested for allegedly vandalizing property. Now, while we were doing commentary of that story, a number of our viewers brought attention to a video that had gone viral online, and I wanted to do my own investigation of it to, either confirm it or figure out what's really going on. So, as many as 80 people got arrested in one night because of alleged violence that broke out during nightfall in St. Louis. Now, the protest took place in response to a cop who shot and killed a black man, and how the case ended up with his, he wasn't found guilty. The judge in the case did not find him guilty of murder. So people were upset about it. They took to the streets. They protested. The protests were largely peaceful. But as soon as it got dark outside, a small group of people, according to police, started vandalizing property and causing trouble. Now, the video that our audience brought attention to featured what appeared to be a cop in St. Louis vandalizing a restaurant by breaking a window, okay? So a video shot appears to show a police officer breaking the glass window in front of a Culpeper's restaurant, leading to many people questioning whether the officer was responsible for damage attributed to protesters. Now, this is a serious concern because some are alleging that there were agitators there who attempted to make the protesters appear to be violent, maybe provocateurs. So when, this was brought to my attention, I did want to look into it. Now, Chris Phillips, who's a filmmaker, is the person who filmed that video that went viral. I want to show you that video and then give you the update in terms of whether or not the cop is actually guilty of the vandalism. Take a look. You're down this class. You're down this class. Why would you break the? Why would they break the fucking window? Culpepper. Yeah, it's Culpepper. Yeah, Culpepper. He's kicking it down. Walking, let him do it, and he just on the side. He literally just took a thing and completely busted it. Two of them by themselves. Literally just busted it. Okay, so when I saw that, that was cause for concern, of course. And so Riverfront Times was the news organization that published that video, that put it out there. That's the story that went viral. They have just done an update to the story, and I want to make sure that we have all the facts and you can draw your own conclusions based on what we know. Now, there was a resident in the area by the name of Katie O'Connor who said, no, that's actually not the case. That window was already broken. In fact, we had taken a photo of that broken window 30 minutes prior to that video, and there was a timestamp on the picture to prove it. Let's go to graphic 6, which shows the picture that Katie O'Connor shared with the press, and that shows you the restaurant's window already broken. Again, 30 minutes prior to that video taken. Katie O'Connor, who lives in the neighborhood, says she and her husband witnessed a young man throw something at Culpeper's through what was then an unbroken window around 11 p.m., breaking it. She was quoted as saying, I don't truly know the officer's motivation. Maybe he was breaking out glass as an asphalt move. Maybe he was clearing out dangerous shards, which did exist. But I'm absolutely positive he was not the one who originally broke that window. Now, to add more evidence to that argument, The police department released surveillance from the area showing what occurred prior to the officer being seen at that area or in that area. So this is, again, surveillance footage, and here's what it shows. Take a look. So obviously you can't see whether or not that guy throwing something broke the window, but it appears that he threw something at the window that could have broken it, and then who knows what the cop was doing, because you heard in that video that there was something breaking,
yes.
Right? So look, I'm giving you guys all the evidence that we have because I think it's interesting, and people are outraged and angry about it. I think that it would be incredibly stupid for the cop to break that window, knowing that there's so many people surrounding him with phones and they're filming everything that's going on. But that's where the story stands at the moment, and I wanted to make sure I gave you all the details.
The cop seemed to have done a stupid thing, at least in his own mind, because he got the hell away from that window as soon as he made that loud noise.
That's right. It looks very incriminating.
Which is like, oh my God. So yeah. I wonder if he was playing with the shards or whatever, because I do believe the time-stamping reporting, and that it was broken, and it didn't seem like he was on purpose trying to make people safer by cleaning out the shards.
Yeah, and also you're tampering with evidence.
Right.
Like, don't touch those windows. I don't know what he was doing. I think that, if I were his superior, I would ask him, like, why would you do that? If we're arresting people, and by the way, there were reporters who said that they were doing mass arrests, that they were telling the crowds to disperse, but then they wouldn't give them the opportunity to do so, and then they would do the mass arrest. There were reporters who said that. There were reporters who were arrested. And so I'm not going to sit here and say that, the cops handled it perfectly, because they were also caught on camera chanting, "Whose streets? Our streets." And so if you're there to make sure that the situation doesn't escalate, if you're there to do crowd control and make sure that people don't get hurt and people don't vandalize, the last thing you want to do is chant, "Whose streets? Our streets," as the cops.
That's what the cops were chanting?
Yes.
That's terrible.
So
it's such a weird thing to do.
It antagonizes and it escalates the situation, and it's unnecessary, right? So, look, I want to thank you guys for bringing that video to my attention, because I did find it fascinating,
Right. It really goes to show what people are feeling in general, their reaction to those videos. As before all the evidence comes out. When you are on the streets and you're frustrated with what happened as the result of that court case, folks are upset. The police officers, you get the feeling toward that. And then when you see this whip pan to the loud sound and the police walk away, it shows more your feelings about it, which I totally understand
Absolutely.
and get. I'm glad that it seems that the police officer wasn't just going to break windows, because that would be terrible if, as some say, it seems like they would pin that on protesters that didn't exist.
Right.
It seems like this has to do with someone who threw something through a window. I'm glad that we seem to have gotten all of the pieces of evidence that paint a picture about it, and we can turn our focus back on the fundamental issue of, police and the public.
Right, exactly. And keep in mind, if you are a cop who is on duty during these protests, look, I get it. You feel like you're under attack because these protests primarily have to do with police brutality and excessive force. But if you are trying to make a point that your job is difficult and you just want to protect and serve, then you shouldn't antagonize the protesters. You shouldn't, chant things that, stroke tension or anger. And essentially that was part of what went on. Not all the cops. There was a small number of cops that were caught on camera chanting that. But, just put your feelings aside for a second and just do your job and try not to escalate the situation further than it already is escalated.
Yeah.
Okay, we got to take a quick break. Let's do that. When I come back, I'm going to read your TYT lives, and then a small-town football team caught burning crosses. What was the response, and what is the legal response that school administrators can have? I'll give you that story and more.
rule against Siri.
Okay.
I don't use Siri. No one actually uses Siri. And every time you press that button for a little too long,
I know. Siri?
How can I help you? Just shush. It happened earlier in the post game.
I'm so over Siri. So over. And also,
Siri's kind of a bitch.
You know what? She is kind of a bitch.
Okay.
You know why? Okay, first of all, no one enjoys or is excited about setting their alarm clock to 6 a.m. But you know who is excited? Fucking Siri.
She just asked me that.
Oh.
She's like, do you want me to set your alarm clock for 6:30 a.m.? Like, no, I don't.
No, watch. Yeah, she's fucking eager to do it. Like, she's a weirdo. Watch. Set my alarm for 4 a.m.
I don't think
I didn't find any appointments for tomorrow at 4 a.m. Shall I?
You know you're on air, bitch. Like, what's going on? Okay, but usually
I shall now fuck with you.
So usually I'll be like, set the alarm for 6 a.m. She'll be like, okay, I turned it off. And it's like, why are you so excited? Earthquake preparedness. That will be the discussion for the post game. We will share personal stories. Brett and I lived through a giant earthquake that occurred in the San Fernando Valley, Los Angeles County, to be specific. And we have fun stuff to share with you guys.
There's mindsets that people have that are from California or people that aren't from California, because I've done both. And you guys are the established all your whole lifers.
Where are you from originally?
St. Louis.
St.
I was
Louis.
born here, but I was in St. Louis when Northridge went down.
Gotcha.
And when Oakland went down.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you about that.
Yeah, and
the way people think that aren't here.
Yeah, I do want to hear it because there was a small earthquake last night. Christian and I both felt it, and we both had different reactions. And I want to share those reactions with you guys. Okay? We had a disagreement. Not a tiff, not any type of argument, but a disagreement. Okay?
Love it.
All right, so TYT Lives, Daniel says, remember, nature doesn't care about your puny human borders and silly political tiffs.
But what if it did? What would it tweet? You know, what would it tweet if it did care about our borders?
Oh, God.
Set that
Hopefully
up.
it wouldn't tweet. Hopefully, if that ever happened, Twitter wouldn't even exist anymore.
It's like your mother, but it's Mother Nature.
Yeah. All right, moving on to other news. High school football players in Iowa are under fire after they decided to burn a cross while wearing KKK garb and then proceeded to post about it on social media. So those are 5 individuals who are part of a small town football team in Creston, Iowa, and they are at Creston High School. And so this debate has emerged regarding what right administrators have to, punish or make these students pay consequences. They have been booted from the football team, so that has already happened. But some are questioning whether or not there are First Amendment protections for the students here. Now, on a school campus, the First Amendment has even more limitations. If the behavior or the speech of a particular student is a distraction and is distracting other students from a sound educational environment, administrators can take matters into their own hands. So there are even more limits on a school campus. However, in this case, this did not happen on a school campus, and they also didn't target a specific student. So the ability for the administrators to pass down any type of punishment is incredibly limited, according to some. So let me give you the details. The 5 students in the town of Creston staged a cross burning that was captured on social media earlier this month, with all of them wearing white hoods. One held what appeared to be a Confederate flag, another held what appeared to be an assault rifle. Now, here are the arguments in regard to what administrators can do in terms of punishments. Because the students are minors, the school did not reveal what disciplinary action was taken. They have been removed from the football team, but as unsettling as the act was, it's not clear that it's legally appropriate for the school to mete out a punishment. So there is precedent regarding incidents like this. Now, not necessarily racial issues, but issues where students have done something questionable, administrators wanted to take action, and then the Supreme Court ruled on it. So let me give you the examples. In 1992, for instance, the Supreme Court overturned the conviction of a teenager who burned a cross on the lawn of an African-American family. They overturned it. Then in 2003, the court struck down a Virginia statute that prohibited cross burning based on the distinction between intimidation or direct threat and messages of shared ideology. So if it is a direct threat, if they are targeting a specific individual, there is a case to be made that the administrators can, dole out some sort of punishment. However, if it's just a political statement, which in this case, the argument is that they're making a political statement, even though it's disgusting, well, then administrators can't do anything about that. Thoughts?
I mean, definitely off the football team. That's what I mean. I get it.
They have black football teammates.
Yes. And this is not an ambiguous symbol. The wearing of they talk about the ambiguity as to whether it's directed at any individual, but there's nothing less ambiguous than wearing a hood like this and burning a cross. And so I don't know. I would stay within the legal bounds of whatever the school board can or cannot do. I would go to the furthest extent. And getting them off the football team is a good start, but this is not like a sun rising or a sun setting. You make the call. These are people who are. This is like the name Adolf, a swastika. These are very clear indicators that you do not that you are affiliating yourself with a hate group. And by that definition, I would go as far as possible. I'm struck by the one of those decisions that you mentioned, where like a teenager burned a cross on the lawn of an African American family, and they overturned the conviction.
Right.
But like, how is that possible? There's no legal remedy. There's no criminal case or criminal punishment that you could bring against that person. I think you absolutely have to.
Right. I mean, and look, I really want to look into the details of that ruling, because based on what I know right now, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean,
like trespassing or landscape vandalism. Right.
I mean, if it was on private property, you can at least make the case that there was trespassing. And I mean, can you imagine someone burning a cross on your front lawn and then the Supreme Court, overturning a conviction? I mean, that's insane. But I will look into that. Look, I do agree that the administrator's power is limited in this case, because it happened when class was not in session. It didn't happen on the school campus, and this doesn't just have to do with racial issues. I mean, this issue comes up a lot when it comes to bullying. Either online or after school hours. What can administrators do to punish those who are bullying other students? Right. So I don't know how this is going to play out. President doesn't look good, right?
Well, yeah, and it's also how liberal I'm going to be, I guess, for lack of a better word, is on the one hand, part of me is like, you're off the football team, you're expelled from the school. This is not the kind of behavior that we think is befitting of the people who attend here. Mm-hmm. So we're going to put severe, at least extended suspensions on you, because this does seem like the kind of thing that kids do for attention, probably. Mm-hmm. And it's stupid, it's misguided, and I think they need to suffer consequences, or there's no reason to have a school in the first place, because we're teaching kids things and we can't reinforce this, and we need to find a way so that they know that what they did is bad. Another thing, it's like more of an educational and behavioral developmental psychology thing, is when you read up on kids who get out into like weird little subcultures like white supremacist groups, I've read a couple books on this, and a lot of them point to having a community that isn't
like a gang.
It's gang behavior, terrorist behavior in different parts of the world, teenage-ness itself is like a construct invented by Americans in the 50s, a lot of them say, or whatever. Mm-hmm. But to have a community that doesn't reinforce the behavior of white supremacy, the textbook example of that is a football team. Yeah. Where people of all different backgrounds have to come together and work together, but it depends on how good the coach is at making that happen, of sitting these kids down together and saying, listen, this is not going to fly. But I think that's after some very concrete punishment that's put into play. But if they're they're going to join and reinforce this white supremacist subgroup unless there is massive pushback from the community and from the school board and from the football team and everyone that they come into contact with, that this is not acceptable and this is not okay.
So this is going to take place on campus during all hours, as you guys mentioned.
Right.
Then the wonder is how much they can do. But if you think these guys who are participating in this kind of action when they're not at school, if it isn't being discussed, talked about, implemented
on campus,
happening in the rest of their lives, you're crazy. So this is why the perception of, there was the guy who murdered a couple of black guys in Baton Rouge, and then one of the headlines or things said, clean-cut all-American white guy does this, right? It was like, oh, how could this happen? Because it's actually within the community, it's in his mindset, it's who he is. So that perception of this, it's just a white guy who made a mistake and he had youthful exuberance and all that bullshit, it's actually real. So let's think about the scary people. So if there's a Latino or a black gang, or there's guys who are in gangs and they go to school. We know there's those metal detectors at schools and bad communities because they're wondering, they're going to bring this stuff into the school. How do we not think that this gang isn't going to bring their stuff into the school? So they start banning these gang members from coming into schools or making sure they don't bring their BS into that school. We have to see it the same way. So we're afraid of those minority gangs, but why aren't we afraid of this gang who has a very long history of doing things to harm people? Anything is to protect your school. So it's just a perception of these kind of guys. They go, they're bad guys, they can hurt people. But they're not that bad. It's just a after-school activity rather than their life.
what's the solution? Is it like rehabilitating? Is it a rehabilitation kind of thing? Like, I mean, that's what I mean by like, how liberal am I? Because like I feel like such a puss if I'm just gonna say like, let's take all the gang member, let's take the white kid, and let's make them better through school.
Look,
like,
I
you know, like
it's
I versus like let's have everyone get a punishment.
Because sorry.
No, you finish your thought.
I'm saying it's the community. So how do you? It's like with our society in general. How do you change that? There's the bad apples in the police department, but really that ends up destroying all of the people because they started protecting each other. So how do you change the mindset of a society? Because all police officers, as I've said before, are just members of society that have a job where they can shoot you later when they're working. So how do you change people's perception? It's really hard to do. It's a hard question to answer.
I have an answer for that, okay? So, by the way, I want to be clear about something because there is what I would want to do, and then there's what the law would allow me to do, right? And so if I just acted based on my own instinct and did what I wanted to do and ignored the law, they're out. They're completely out. But I'm just simply telling you what kind of protections these students have, which, by the way, I'm very curious, if similar protections would be extended. I mean, would we have this kind of debate? And I think this goes to your point, JR. Would we have this kind of debate if you had a group of black students from this college, or I'm sorry, this high school, getting together and talking about, I don't even know, doing something that's perceived as racist toward white students? I mean, that would be a national story that people would not stop talking about. This happened a month ago, and I didn't even know it occurred. It didn't even get any coverage until now, right? So anyway, the point that I wanted to...
Such wuss bags, but they look so ridiculous, is I think what it is.
Yeah, they do look ridiculous. And look, whether they wanted this for attention or whether they actually believe, in what they're doing, that doesn't matter. What does matter in my eyes is education, because education is what hopefully will weed out this type of ignorance, because it stems from ignorance. It's this insensitivity to a really dark time in America that unfortunately is now experiencing a reemergence. But if I were an educator on that campus and I found out that the students are doing this, okay, I am going to emphasize certain things in my curriculum for the rest of the semester, right? And so if you think this is cute and you think this is funny, let's have a discussion about lynchings. Let's have a real discussion about America's history. Because the funny thing is, conservatives argue that, liberal indoctrinations on school campuses. Really? Because if there were a liberal indoctrination, and, these liberal educators were as effective as you think they were, you think people would take this as a joke? Right? If anything, I think that we have moved so far behind effective, history education, social studies education. It's fucking devastating. These kids don't know what they're doing. They're kids. They don't know what they're doing. And so, okay,
but
I guess they should. They should.
The thing
so
is,
let's have a refresher. Let's have an actual discussion about what happened during the Civil War. I'm not talking about sharing my opinion. Who cares about my opinion?
Right.
Let's talk about actual facts, what this country went through, because I guess a lot of people have forgotten. But
it just goes back to the unambiguity, the lack of ambiguity of let's burn crosses. It's. I get it. I mean, I get the frustration because it's you're the. I mean, you want to make a distinction between gang members and a clan. A gang and a clan, that's the same word.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Ugh.
So pathetic.
The last parents in too, because that's where they learned it from.
Yeah.
Young, idiot, racist kids turn into old, idiot adults who are just as racist and have more power and start passing this down to the next generation. Like I said, you got to bring in everybody to teach them something, but who has the patience to teach these idiots something? Or I don't know. You don't want to sit down and talk to these guys. I mean,
get them on a fire code
discussion about whether or not we're going to change who they are. But again, the counterparts, what some people think of violence of other people, they say, "Oh, lock them up, send them to juvie, F them, get them out of here." I'm ready to go that route. You just fucked up. Your life is over. Go away. Right.
Oh God, it's so disappointing. Anytime these devastating stories about racial tension come up, the one thing that I would always fall back on to make myself feel a little better is that young people are smarter. But no, they're not.
These young people are stupid. Let's put it that way.
Extremely stupid. And also, you know, that hate rally in Charlottesville, those weren't middle-aged white dudes. They were young, early 20s, late teens, white guys.
Mm-hmm.
For the
We're
most
going to
part.
talk about it in the next story.
Yeah. Okay, so let's discuss them. The so-called alt-right, which I like to call white supremacists because that's what they really are, apparently have a beef with Jennifer Lawrence, who's a white actress. So what's the issue here? Well, it turns out that they think that she is attacking them when in reality she's not. And the latest issue has to do with a movie that she stars in called Mother, with an exclamation mark at the end. Now, Mother is an experimental film. It is a psychological thriller, and there are a lot of references to religion there. So the religious right in the country has an issue with that because they think that their religion is being utilized to send a political anti-climate change message, okay? So to give you an example of some of the criticism that Jennifer Lawrence has faced because she's in this movie, a Breitbart editor by the name of John Nolte writes, "The chickens have finally come home to roost for Jennifer Lawrence's hateful mouth. Mother is a catastrophe for Lawrence, one of Hollywood's most stridently bigoted former stars." Every time I hear someone from the so-called alt-right talk, all that really comes out is, look at these attractive women that won't have sex with me. Like, I'm so frustrated, right? Like, I don't know.
Incel. Involuntary celibacy. It's a whole sub-genre of guys just like this. She won't bang you, ever. It feels like they're trying to run up to her and pull her hair on the play yard and be like, I don't love you at all, and then run away. Not to mention, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Okay, so Jennifer Lawrence talks about the film, and this doesn't really give you any spoilers, but it kind of explains what the meaning of the film is. And like I said, there are a ton of religious references there. So according to Jennifer Lawrence, it depicts the rape and torment of Mother Earth. It's not for everybody. It's a hard film to watch, but it's important for people to understand the allegory we intended, that they know I represent Mother Earth. Javier, meaning Javier Bardem, whose character is a poet, represents a form of God. A creator, Michelle Pfeiffer, is an Eve to Ed Harris's Adam, and the setting sometimes resembles the Garden of Eden. Okay, so the religious right upset, don't touch our religion, especially when you're trying to make a political point about climate change. Okay.
That's why no one saw the movie. What she just said there is because it's so laden with symbolism, and it disappears so far up its own ass with trying to create an allegory that no one liked this movie. Like, it didn't do well. Gave it an F. Before showing it at the latest festival, Aronofsky said, "You're going to hate me in an hour and a half." And the reason for that is it is one of those things where he did Black Swan, and that was accessible because it was enjoyable from both a narrative and a symbolic perspective. By all accounts, Mother is a bad movie because it has no redeeming narrative. It is all you having to figure out what does her hair symbolize and what does the color of the background symbolize. That's why no one saw the movie. That's why it made $3 million in its box office, or $7.5 million globally in its box office, because it's the kind of movie whose title is lowercase with an exclamation point at the end. Like, that's why people didn't see it. These alt-right guys are swooping in over the corpse of this failed blockbuster attempt and saying, that was us. But the truth is, no, it wasn't you at all. That's like, your rival lost a football game and you're saying, it's because I was rooting against them. No, they just weren't. It was a bad team. It was a bad game.
Yeah, so the movie has gotten a lot of criticism, but you're right. The alt-right's kind of latching onto it and saying it's because of our boycott, but it's not because of your boycott. It was, based on what I've read from the critics, just a bad film and too overly artistic to the point where a lot of people were like,
right.
I don't want to spend too much time interpreting what's going on.
It's all the double dildo scene from his other movie.
Double dildo scene?
Really? What was that one? With Jennifer Connelly? Oh, God. What was it called? We need Bart. Bart knows it.
Requiem for a Dream.
It's all Requiem for a Dream double dildo scene without, that's what it is.
Did you see it?
I didn't see Mother. But from all accounts of what I've read, the other thing is you're not going to see Mother. So I can say that to you. Like, no one's going to go see it.
You know
It
why?
is almost to the point where it's gotten so universally panned, your expectations are low enough where you can go see it, and if it's as bad as everyone says, you can enjoy it because it's so terrible, and if it's not as bad as everybody says, you can be like, it wasn't that bad. People are giving it a tough rap. Bad rap.
Okay. Well, okay, so there was the movie situation, and then, in my opinion, the funnier situation had to do with a Vogue cover that Jennifer Lawrence was on. By the way, like, who has time to think about this kind of stuff? Like, if I saw that at a newsstand, I'd be like, oh, okay, typical Vogue cover, whatever. But the alt-right felt that this cover was an assault and an attack on them.
Why?
What?
I mean, obviously.
So
now that I look at it, it's pretty obvious.
What? Okay, so let me give you the details.
Yeah.
Real quick. So, according to Newsweek, divisions between Lawrence and the alt-right erupted in August when she was photographed in front of the Statue of Liberty for the cover of Vogue, along with an article titled American Beauty, Jennifer Lawrence on Love, Liberty, and the Freedom to Be Herself. So, Breitbart editor John Carney, who, again, has too much time on his hands, said, we're going to have to create a full Make America Great Again, or MAGA, shadow culture industry because the opposition media can't even do fashion without attacking us.
That sentence looks like it was created by, some auto sentence generator of alt-right words.
Probably, yeah. And okay, so here's what their theory was. Do you guys remember when Stephen Miller, that's his name, right? Stephen Miller was having that debate with Jim Acosta about the Statue of Liberty and immigrants, right? And so Acosta was like, hey, bring me your tired, you're poor, what the Statue of Liberty says. They got into a disagreement. Steve Miller said, no, that was added later, as if that's relevant. And so the alt-right thought that Vogue, I mean, this is how crazy they are. They thought Vogue did that cover as some sort of, attack against the alt-right. And it was some sort of comment on immigration. Little did they know that they actually shot that cover a month before that exchange occurred. Okay? You guys are insane. You guys are crazy, and that's why no one wants to sleep with you.
But illustration of the projection that has to happen when, I wish these oppressed people that keep talking about how oppressed they are, get over it, number one. How much has America changed, and why do you keep playing the race card? It's because they want to do that over nothing. Everything has to do with you. Vogue just can't wait to get on the 15 people that are sitting around bitching about everything all the time. Oh, it's about us. Oh, you just want to make America. I thought you were powerful. I thought you had the president. I thought the president had a sweepingly, killer election where he took everyone out. Mm-hmm. You're weak? Which one is it? Are you strong or are you weak?
Weak. You're right.
That sounds like cucky language. You know what I'm saying? Cucky behavior.
I want to, take a bath after I hear the word cuck.
I like the word cuck.
I don't like it at all. It's I can't even, make fun of it because it makes me feel so icky.
Why?
I don't like it.
You know, cuck is a real thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's a subculture.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Oh, I did. Once it started trending, I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean,
creepy.
You know what?
Same as incel. Incel is the most cucky of it all.
I don't know what incel is.
Involuntary celibacy. It's people
right.
who are these women are so up their own butts that they don't realize what a catch I am. Mm-hmm. And it's no, it's because you're complaining and weak. That's why they don't like you.
Yeah, and also joining a group of people who whine and complain about how women don't want to sleep with you doesn't somehow miraculously convince women to sleep with you.
Yeah.
Right? If someone that you want to have sex with is rejecting you, you don't necessarily blame the person rejecting you. I don't know, maybe there's something about you that person just isn't into, right? Maybe it's just a preference thing. Maybe you're just weird and unattractive, and I'm not talking about physically, although that also plays a role, but maybe you support really terrible things, and that's why, you're part of, what is it called? Incel?
Incel.
Huh.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
I don't know. Ugh.
All right, we are almost out of time, so I want to take a quick minute.
Take a minute.
Quick minute to thank you guys for watching, and also, if you are a member, please check out the post-game show today. JR, are you going to stick around?
Fine, whatever. I mean, last time it happened, what is it? Right? That was a fan favorite.
Yes.
Anna said no one disliked it.
I did not say that.
Everybody loved it. I want to hear from these idiots who didn't like it.
No, don't call our members.
No, not our members. I love them, all the smart members, but the people who didn't like it seem to be idiots.
By the way, I don't know who liked it and didn't like it. I'm completely making all this stuff up.
She's
okay?
being modest.
All right.
She knows.
So, by the way, real quick, if you like old school, there will be an old school episode this week, even though Cenk is out of town. So far, the hosts include myself and Kim Porcher. There will be a third person, I believe. So check that out. If you aren't a member, you can join by going to tytnetwork.com/join. Not only do you support us here in studio, but you also support our entire team, the awesome producers, the awesome staff, the reporters. We love you guys. Thank you so much for keeping us independent. Thank you to Brett, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.
And JR, damn it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.